Chapter 15, Our Many Souls, Power, and Potential. In the last chapter, we discussed parts of the soul, starting with the physical body, leek, and the working our way up through the ego, ek. Two aspects of the mind, hugger and mini, and the vital breath, and. Now things are going to get a little stranger. We have a daily experience of most of the soul components covered so far. Even the and is familiar to yoga practitioners and martial artists, but now we are going to consider parts of ourselves we didn't even know we had. The ecstatic state, WOD. The next soul component is actually a state or condition, rather than an identifiable structure. Ecstasy or WOD arises, at least in part, from cultivating the and, or vital breath, and it is the key to activating and strengthening the more extraordinary components in these pages that follow. The ancients seem to have included it as one of the parts of the soul for that reason, and I have followed their lead. Ecstasy allows us to touch, however briefly, the world of the gods, and indeed to act as a god. It is supernormal condition. We gain insight and have powers that are denied us in normal consciousness. WOD lies at the root of the ancient Germanic mystical tradition. However, relatively few of us will choose to participate in this high flights of the soul. Mystics, magicians, and shamans have always been a small percentage of the population, just as we do not expect the average Catholic to have visions of the Virgin Mary. We do not anticipate that many of Ausatru's will delve into the mysteries of Odin or Freya. Most of us are content to honor our ancestors and holy powers, living our lives as honorably and productively as we can, and leave deeper mysteries to the few. Nevertheless, some will explore these forbidding inner landscapes. And all of us should at least know that these things are part of our lore. WOD is the domain of Odin, father of the gods. His name is actually the title meaning master of the WOD. He continually seeks wisdom and magical power, partly because it is his responsibility to prepare for Ragnarok, the great battle of the end of this cycle of time, but also because he pursues wisdom for its own sake. Odin is the supreme model of personal evolution, our guide on the path to the Ubermensch, or superhuman, and our inspiration to be and to do more. Magical power, superhuman consciousness, wisdom, and even the poetic arts are tightly knotted together with the idea of WOD in the northern mind. It is this altered state, our left brain and right brain act as one integrated whole. The enhanced capabilities that come with ecstasy allow us to construct, strengthen, and communicate with the exotic soul components we'll be discussing later in this chapter. With it, we become a transformed being fully capable of utilizing all our soul cells. It allows us to imitate Odin and share in the essence of godhood. If this sounds like more than you bargained for, remember that this is the path for a very few. No one will compel you to take this route. But supposing you did want to walk the way of Odin, how would you go about it? Using WOD for spiritual growth. In Ausatru, aesthetic conditions is linked with magical incantations, the singing of songs and poetic verse. All of these have three features in common. 1, alterations in the path of breath. 2, a specific rhythm. And 3. Some sort of association imagery. These functions use both the left brain logical mind and the right brain image creating mind, synchronizing their activity to induce a state of wholesomeness and lift consciousness to a higher level. Therefore, to experiment with woad, compose poetry, seek out the meter and alternative style of the ancient Norse skalds or poets, infuse verse with the traditional poetic metaphors called kinnings, and meditate on the meaning and imagery they convey. Use your poems ritually and recite them with passion. The story of Odin's winning of the mead of inspiration refers to two other methods for attaining ecstasy. In this tale, Odin persuades the giantess Gunlod, who guards the mead, to share the holy liquor with him by spending 3 nights in love play with her. The sought-after mead is much more mysterious than the mere honey wine drunk by mortals. A powerful concoction accompanied by sex magical techniques among to a kind of Teutonic tantra would be a powerful inducement to ecstasy. Individuals who have a strong background in safe use of herbal lore and tantric technique may be qualified to experiment along these lines. Luck, personal power, and so much more. Haminga. Haminga is the Old Norse word, often translates as luck. More precisely, as it has 3 different but related meanings. 1. The total spiritual power of a person. 2. The ability to magically take on an animal shape. And 3. Luck in the ordinary meaning of the word. The first meaning, personal spiritual power, is primary. Haminga is comparable to the mana of specific cultures. It can be thought of as a magical charge, bestowing a sense of presence, wisdom, influence, and success on those who possess it. According to the old belief, Haminga even played a role in combat. The individual with the greatest Haminga would be victorious. We increase our Haminga through right action, making wise choices and doing right deeds. Unlike Christian grace, which is bestowed at God's pleasure, Haminga is 100% earned. We can understand how the uninitiated, with no deeper religious or esoteric knowledge, would connect this personal power with the idea of luck. To the outside observer, it would seem that the certain people were lucky. A closer look would reveal that these people had the luck that comes from proper preparation, not just the obvious material world, but in the spiritual realm as well. In Alsatru, you get the lucky you get the luck you make. The word Haminga originally refers to shape-shifting ability. Turning into an animal, or realistically making someone perceive that you have done so, requires a great deal of magical power. So we can see how the same term came to be used to describe both spiritual and magical might on the one hand, and taking on an animal shape on the other. Using Haminga for spiritual growth. There are many ways of increasing one's personal spiritual power. The simplest is to consciously try to live by the virtues and values of Alsatru as listed elsewhere in this book. The 9 noble virtues, the noble values, and the 12 thews. Each evening before retiring, go over the list and see how you did during the day. Where were you weak? Where were you strong? What can you do tomorrow to improve on any one of them? Don't get disappointed if you have fallen. Just pick yourself up and try again tomorrow. Many small deeds, one with consistency and mindfulness, train the character over the weeks, months, and years. This is a lifelong project. Beyond a general training of the character, there's a specific spiritual and or magical acts that help build Haminga. Blessing your food, greeting the rising sun, honoring the full moon, pouring a libation to the ancestors or the holy powers. All these are examples, along with more elaborate rituals done either with others or alone. The traditional Alsacher rites called bloat and sumbel, described elsewhere in this book, are valuable aids in developing spiritual might. Immerse yourself in the traditional lore by reading the Eddas and great heroic epics like Beowulf. Memorize stanzas from the Havamal and Völuspá. Learn a dramatic language, modern German or a present-day Scandinavian tongue, or, best of all, Old Norse. You can add to your Haminga by successfully fulfilling oaths, swearing to accomplish some particular deed, great or small, and carrying through it. This practice builds will, self-discipline, and self-knowledge. The amount of Haminga gained is proportional to the difficulty of the deed undertaken. There is a great danger here, however. Breaking an oath takes away the same amount of Haminga as you would have earned by fulfilling it. For this reason, make your oaths with great foresight. Although with taking many small actions in everyday life, consider something that was greatly valued in our traditional culture: heroism. In ancient times, heroes fought great battles, won kingdoms, or slew monsters. Ragnar Lodbrok, a Sigurd the Volsungs, killed dragons. Thor fought Midgard's serpent, and Tyr placed his hand in the mouth of the Fenris wolf. Today's monsters are different, but just as dangerous, and there are great deeds to be done that have nothing to do with swords. Save the ecosystem, risk your life to serve your kin, found a multi-million-dollar foundation to serve our folk, overthrow a tyrannical regime, change a paradigm. The fetch or philia. With our discussion of the ecstatic condition, Wode, and the personal power, Haminga, we have beyond the boundaries of most people's experience, transitioning completely from the mundane to the metaphysical. The fetch, or philia, continues this journey and takes us deeply into the shamanic and magical realm. The fetch is a mysterious entity. From the way it is described in the old sagas, you'd never suppose that it was part of the soul. In the contrary, it appears to be an independent being, often manifesting as a woman, perhaps gigantic in stature or fantastic in appearance, or even as one of Odin's battle maidens, a Valkyrie. Sometimes the fetch can show itself as an animal that corresponds to the personality of the person with whom it is connected. Bears, wolves, deer, mice are only some of the forms taken by the fetch. It is animal aspect. In many cases, the fetch acts in a protective role. None of this sounds much like part of the soul, does it? However, despite this apparent degree of anatomy, the fetch may actually be a hidden part of ourselves. Modern Modern psychology gives us something very similar to the fetch in the archetype Carl Jung called the anima. It typically manifests in dreams or in visionary experiences as a powerful female figure. Although it seems to be a separate entity from the person to whom it may manifest, it is nevertheless a part of that individual, one unknown to the waking conscious. The fetch is very much like this. You might think of a fetch as a livelier, three-dimensional, more real version of the anima. The fetch has several important functions. It serves as a channel for spiritual power, numerous knowledge, and love. The gods and goddesses communicate to us through the fetch. The fetch sometimes provides second sight or information about events yet to come. Although with its gifts, it often places obligations or responsibilities on the person to whom it is attached. A fetch also provides protection, a fact that becomes significant when we note the popularity of angels in the modern popular culture. Dozens of books have been published in recent years recounting cases in which men and women encounter beings they describe as guardians, angels. Indeed, Christian doctrine commonly teaches that human being is assigned a guardian angel at birth. But what are these angels anyways? We find a clue in the old Icelandic story called Njál's Saga, where in chapter 100, Sidu Haldr says that he wants the archangel Michael as his Felha Ingel, Felha being the Old Norse word for the fetch. The guardian angel of the Christian lore, then, is nothing more than the dramatic fetch in new clothes. As a result, all these modern accounts of angels are evidence for the truth of our traditional belief. The Valkyries of our lore are pictured as beautiful women, daughters of Odin, who ride through the battlefield and choose fallen warriors. These they carry back with them to Valhalla, there to feast and fight until the great battle of Ragnarok. Other times, the Valkyrie are described as ferocious, corpse-devouring demons of death and battle, who weave magical chants and contending armies prepare to clash. A close look, however, shows that they are nothing more or less than the form of the fetch. Like the fetch, they impart protection, magical knowledge, and foresight. They serve as lovers to their chosen hero. Like the fetch, they are the means of communication between humans and the holy powers, the gods and the goddesses. There are two kinds of fetches. One is born with the individual and stays with him or her throughout life, departing only at death. In the Old Norse literature, this individual fetch was called the man's Felha. It was the summary of all that the person was or had done, the complex expression of the person's deeds and duties. Parallel to the individual fetch was the Kynfelha, or the fetch of the entire lineage. This was usually attached to the head of the clan and was transferred to someone else, traditionally the chief's son at death. Its function was much like the personal fetch. The Kynfelha was the storehouse of the might of the clan and was made stronger by great deeds done by the clan members. Using the fetch for spiritual growth. The fetch is the key to the highest known levels of spiritual evolution. It is this entity in the form of the Valkyrie which enables us to cross the fiery rainbow bridge into Valhalla and take our places with the Einherjar, Odin's chosen heroes. In actuality, this is a metaphor for our own transformation into demigods, sovereign, powerful, and for most purposes immortal. Becoming aware of the fetch, then learning from it, and using these encounters for spiritual progress is the work of a lifetime. There are parallels to other mystical systems. Aleister Crowler might have called it attaining the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, but fetch work is firmly a part of the ancestral way of the northern peoples. Everything that promotes all-around spiritual development will facilitate the growth and individual manifestation of the Philia. There is little I can add to this except to mention that there is a specific ritual that can be used by properly prepared individuals to encounter the fetch. Perhaps the best is given to the 9 Doors of the Midgard by Edred Thorson. The Soul, a summary. Some writers describe more soul components than I have dealt with here. My intent has been to make a complex subject as simple as possible, and to explain the use of these soul parts for spiritual evolution. Most people will never consciously experience some of the more esoteric fragments that make up the complete human being. But all of us, even if we do not walk these higher paths of development ourselves, should be aware that they exist. There has been a logical progression in the analysis used in these 2 chapters. The first parts I covered the body, the vital breath, the mind, and the memory. All help one reach a condition of ecstasy or woad. The use of this inspired state in a ritual context helps the individual accumulate more personal spiritual power or haminga. This might ultimately develop the fetch and permits full communication with it. For all this apparent complexity, there is an underlying simplicity. As Edred Thorson wrote in Sigurðr, Rebirth and Intuition, his master's thesis at the University of Texas, all of the above concepts and functions, the haminga, the fetch, and several other parts of the soul, are closely interwoven and probably should be best understood as various aspects of the same basic material. All of them spring from consciousness, will, and the progressive use of the magical power associated with the breath. The ego, or sense of self-identification, is central to this whole process. In normal consciousness, we are aware of only a small part of who and what we are. We know, of course, that we are in a body, and we will have some awareness of mind, memory, and breath. We seldom or never experience ecstasy, although almost none of us have any conscious contact with our personal power, much less with the fetch. As we experience these different parts of ourselves, integrating them into our being and bringing them under our control, our sense of who we are grows. This is our goal, to extend our sense of self, becoming fully conscious of what we truly are, and at least what we can potentially be. Our ancestral lore provides a map for personal development and virtual science of the soul by which who choose to do so can walk the very path of the gods. Understanding the parts of the soul complex is also essential to comprehending what happens to us after death. the subject of our next chapter.